It was Mrs. Boaf who made a show of stomping her feet and whining. But I don't wanna. Another joke, though it was how we all felt at this time of morning. You sound like the kids. I joked. Whose? Tracy asked. Hers or ours? Then Mrs. Boaf said, both. She and Tracy laughed again. I didn't. It didn't feel good being reminded how littles were viewed. If they noticed my discomfort, they were either nice enough to stop without apologizing, saving me the embarrassment, or it was just a coincidence how abruptly their bark of laughter ended. Oh, before I forget, Tracy told me. Watch out for rain today. I cocked an eyebrow. Who? Rain, Tracy said. You know, the school receptionist. I threw my head back. Oh, Miss Forrest, I said. I'd long ago developed a habit of thinking of most Amazons by their last name. Even Mrs. Boaf wasn't always Melanie in my mind. What is it this time? I was up front and saw her packing some kind of chocolate, she said. No wrapper. I think she wants to give it to you. I slapped my forehead in exasperation. I know, right? Boaf shook her head in disapproval. That woman, was all she said. Forrest. All Amazons are crazy. I'm still convinced of this. But not all Amazons are equally nutter butters. Boaf was crazy in that any given little, regardless of age, could be either a baby or an adult. I was an adult to her. Her students weren't. Crazy, right? Miss Forrest was crazy because not only were we all babies to her, but she wanted a baby of her own oh so badly. Her own daughter had grown up and moved to college and the gossip mill was churning that she was looking to adopt to fill that empty nest in her life. Typical Amazon. Our school receptionist was a junkie, and I was heroin on two legs. Mrs. Boaf couldn't believe that the woman would violate some unspoken code of Amazon ethics that so very few of them, in reality, actually shared. I couldn't believe anyone would name their kid Rainforest. A knock at the door, out of politeness, and then the turn of a key, and Mrs. Zoj entered. I shoved my hands in my pockets and did my best to look casual as I backed away. Wire-rimmed glasses, wrinkles just starting to set in, and dark black hair despite it all, Mrs. Zoj was Mrs. Boaf's teaching assistant. The maturosis and developmental plateau unit got one too. Toddling and waddling in close behind her was her daughter, Ivy. Good morning everyone, Mrs. Zoj said, eerily cheery as usual. How are you? She looked at me. How are you, Mr. Gibson? She always made a point to single me out. It always sounded so forced when she said it, too. Maybe it was her accent. It probably wasn't her accent. Some rituals weren't always as pleasant as coffee and small talk. I gave my usual non-committal reply. I'm well, thank you. Mrs. Zoj turned to her daughter. Say hello, Ivy, she chirped. Hi, Ivy waved. She did a curtsy, lifting up her short skirt and letting her nappy peek out as she did. It's good to see you all today. A tired chorus of thank you, Ivy, and the girl was satisfied, giggling and clapping her hands as if she'd done a performance. In a way she had, most likely. I hoped. We'd been doing this routine with Mrs. Zoj and her daughter for the last 10 years at least. If you're doing the math and if you have any empathy in you, you also know why being around Mrs. Zoj and her daughter made me distinctly uncomfortable. A fringe benefit for Mrs. Zoj was that her little girl got to attend instead of going to a private daycare. All right, I said, opening the door to my room. Let's go sign in. We can cut through my room. Tracy and Mrs. Boaf were right behind me. Ivy, I swear I just changed you, you silly thing. I heard Mrs. Zoj scoff, lifting the front of a 20-something-year-old little's dress to check for wetness. Don't wait up. We'll meet you at the bus loop. I never waited up.